Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, following up on her reference that inter-Korean reunification would be like hitting a jackpot, President Park, during a national address, proposes a preparatory committee to set up a blueprint for a unified Korea. The US government slaps a $500,000 fine on Asiana Airlines for failing to assist family members of passengers on a flight that crashed last July at San Francisco Airport. Plus, Ukraine's interim leader casts concerns about separatism in the country's Russian-speaking regions after formation of a unity government was delayed. Daybreak begins now.
Thanks for joining us to all our viewers here in Korea and around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, February 26th here in Seoul. You're watching Daybreak and I'm Choi Yu-sun. Let's start this morning at the presidential office where President Park Geun-hye, marking the one-year anniversary of her inauguration, laid out details of her three-year economic innovation plan. The plan also included setting up a preparation committee for reunification on the Korean peninsula. Our Oh Jin-ju reports.
Reunification of the two Koreas will be a bonanza. In line with this comment made in her New Year's address, President Park announced plans to set up a presidential reunification preparation committee to seek out ways to bring about what she called a systematic and constructive reunification.
이곳에서 한반도의 통일을 준비하고 남북 간의 대화와 민간 교류의 폭을 넓혀갈 것입니다.
The committee will operate beyond the purview of the Unification Ministry, with experts and civic groups from various sectors, ranging from foreign affairs and security to the economy and culture, drawing up a specific blueprint for a unified Korea. In her three-year economic innovation plan unveiled in Tuesday's address, President Park vowed to raise the nation's potential economic growth rate to above 4% and per capita income to $40,000 by the year 2017. She put forth three goals: creating an economy with strong fundamentals, making an innovative and dynamic economy, and establishing an economy that balances domestic demand and exports. The president said she will start with rooting out abnormal policies and wrong practices, especially in the public sector. President Park pledged to reduce and cap the debt ratio of public institutions at 200%, which is the upper limit for private companies to issue corporate bonds. The Korea Land and Housing Corporation, for example, which has debts of more than $128 billion, had a debt ratio of over 400% as of last year. And for an innovative economy,
이것을 포함해서 창업 벤처 생태계 조성을 위해 향후 3년간 4조 원 규모의 재정을 투입하겠습니다.
She also promised to increase investment in research and development to 5% of the country's GDP by 2017. Boosting domestic demand comes as an important part of her goal for a balanced economy. The president set a target of reducing the nation's household debt ratio by 5 percentage points by 2017 by handing out tax benefits and introducing fixed interest rates and level debt services for mortgage loans. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
South Korea says the time is ripe to seek dialogue for inter-Korean reunification as neighboring countries are increasingly coming round to the idea of a unified Korea. Speaking at a dinner meeting marking President Park's first year in office Tuesday, Foreign Minister Yun Byung-se said Chinese President Xi Jinping endorsed a unified Korea at last year's summit with President Park. He also said Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed his thoughts on Korea's future role as a stronger, unified country. Minister Yun attributed the changing attitudes to President Park's diplomatic efforts and trust-building policies, including her so-called Eurasia Initiative, which aims to boost economic cooperation with North Korea and Russia. After nearly a week of highly charged emotions, the two Koreas wrapped up their 2 rounds of reunions for war-separated families at North Korea's Mount Kumgang. Analysts say inter-Korean cooperation behind the latest reunions could pave the way for better ties between the two sides. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
It was an emotional day at North Korea's Mount Kumgang on Tuesday as the two Koreas wrapped up their first reunion event for war-separated families in more than 3 years. For most, this could be the last time to see their families living on the other side of the border, as many are already over the age of 80. The 6-day event was conducted in 2 rounds, with the first 3 days arranged by South Korea and the final 3 days arranged by the North. Experts say this rare show of cooperation between the Koreas could lead to a broader thawing of inter-Korean ties.
It signifies the first step for improving inter-Korean ties and serves as a foundation for holding the family reunions on a regular basis, and an occasion to show the world that the two Koreas can solve problems through dialogue.
Upon holding a successful reunion event, the two sides had agreed to address additional humanitarian issues, such as making the family reunions a regular event and sending food and medical aid to the North. Such efforts come in line with President Park Geun-hye's principle of approaching softer issues before addressing more serious matters, like North Korea's nuclear program. Experts say if the Koreas maintain the momentum for dialogue, the possibility of a North Korean provocation is low.
Reflecting on previous cases, there was almost no provocation by North Korea when there was inter-Korean dialogue or cooperation. Even if there was, it was resolved very quickly.
On the second day of the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States, North Korea has yet to criticize its southern neighbor. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Pyongyang has yet to respond to South Korea's offer to help the North deal with an outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease in pigs. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Pyongyang has not given any answer through the inter-Korean channel at the border village of Panmunjom. The ministry proposed talks with North Korea on Monday to discuss what would be the South's first humanitarian assistance to the North in well over 3 years. The North State News Agency reported last week that the foot-and-mouth disease has infected over 3,000 animals. Buried under massive amounts of debt, South Korea's state-owned enterprises are looking for a way out. And the people who run the corporations appeared before lawmakers on Tuesday to explain how they plan to go about doing it. Our parliamentary correspondent Chi Myung-gil has more on the push for public sector reform.
14 CEOs from state-owned enterprises were front and center at a policy briefing of the Parliamentary Land Committee on Tuesday, where they emphasized that their focus is on reducing debts and improving management.
The Korean Land and Housing Corporation is the most indebted public firm. We plan to work closely with the committee's lawmakers in reforming our institution.
Korail continues to assess which assets to sell off this year for debt repayment in line with the government's reform drive.
Public companies have been under fire for handing out what many see as excessive bonuses, benefits and perks to their employees, despite mounting debts and deteriorating business conditions. To reverse the tide, the Korea Railroad Corporation and Korea Electric Power Corporation plan to offload real estate assets and shares to the tune of $1.7 billion and $1.4 billion, respectively. The Korea Expressway Corporation has similar plans, but will also be reforming the main source of its revenue.
After repaying our debt by selling assets and restructuring, we're looking at the price of toll gate fees, which is one of the main causes for our deficit.
The members of the Parliamentary Land Committee listened to the plans and suggested that state-run corporations do more business with smaller enterprises when starting new projects. Lawmakers also urged CEOs to take comprehensive public sector reforms, such as selling non-core assets, reducing excessive benefits to workers, and streamlining their overall business structure to resolve the worsening debt problem. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
One of Korea's umbrella labor unions as well as the railway union staged simultaneous rallies across the country on Tuesday in protest against the Park Geun-hye administration. Connie Kim explains the issues at stake.
The one-year anniversary of President Park's inauguration was not met with celebration by the nation's unions. Some 40,000 angry workers from the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions turned out in force at Seoul Plaza on Tuesday afternoon to demand that President Park Geun-hye step down. They claim her administration has been oppressing workers and moving to privatize public firms. The union workers later staged a walkout protest through central Seoul before returning to the plaza to hold a candlelight vigil. Currently, 1,400 police are on site with water cannons at the ready should the protesters get out of hand. The afternoon rally follows similar ones throughout 12 cities earlier on Tuesday. In the morning, members of the Korean Railroad Corporation staged a one-day walkout. They're demanding that the state-run railway operator withdraw charges against unionists who took part in a strike in December, which was launched in protest of a government plan that would create a subsidiary to run a high-speed train line. The union claims the plan is a first step toward the privatization of Korail. Despite the protest, there were no inconveniences caused in railway operations since Korail had planned ahead and dispatched some 1,800 replacement workers. The greater protest, organized by the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, was expected to draw some 200,000 people, but just 50,000 took part, mainly because the core labor union of Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors decided not to join in. The government has warned of stern measures against those taking part in what it calls an illegal walkout and notified citizens to take public transportation to avoid traffic jams caused by the protests on the streets. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world,
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
on your way to work or at home,
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a
tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. Federal transportation officials in the U.S. have slapped a $500,000 fine on Korea's Asiana Airlines for failing to assist family members of passengers on a flight that crashed last July at San Francisco International Airport. The fine is the first against an airline under a U.S. law that requires prompt and generous assistance to the family members of crash victims. This includes publicizing and staffing a reliable toll-free phone number to get information. The U.S. Department of Transportation said some family members had not been contacted 2 days after the crash and that it took 5 days to reach the families of all 291 passengers. The agency also says the Korean carrier lacked translators and staff trained in crash response. 3 people died and scores were injured last July when Asiana Flight 214 clipped a seawall while attempting to land at San Francisco International Airport. China has made a rare critique on Japan's territorial claim to Korea's Dokdo Island and called on Tokyo to face up to history and earn the trust of its Asian neighbors through practical behavior. During a press briefing, China's foreign ministry called on Japan to reflect on its past when asked about the current Dokdo Island row. Although China has been turning up the volume about Japan's claims to disputed islands in the East China Sea, this is an uncommon move to indirectly stand with Korea. Japan continues to make repeated claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. Korea's Olympic squad returned home on Tuesday to a hero's welcome. Some came home sporting medals, but all came back to a country that greatly appreciates their efforts. Song Ji-sun went out to welcome the athletes and the Olympic flag as the countdown to Pyeongchang 2018 begins.
Home sweet home. Whether returning with medals or without them on Tuesday, all the Korean athletes were welcomed with cheers from home fans after landing at Incheon Airport.
We returned from Sochi with 8 medals overall. We finished in 13th place in the medal count, falling short of our initial goal of being in the top 10. But all the athletes gave it their best, especially the female Olympians.
The underachievement could have been disappointing, considering the efforts input over the past 4 years. But figure skater Kim Yeon-ah is content, despite winning silver in an event many believe she should have won gold in.
I'm just glad that it's all over now and that I was able to show all that I prepared through the tough times. I still can't believe it's all over now.
And those that made a successful debut are already picturing themselves at the next games.
I'm grateful I won medals of all colors. I want to prepare well over the next 4 years and do even better at Pyeongchang.
The Olympic flag from Sochi was also on board the same plane as the athletes and will call the provincial office of Pyeongchang its new home starting later this week.
The run-up to Pyeongchang has begun. All eyes are now on us, and we study everything from Sochi. We will showcase Korea, a developed country now, 3 decades after hosting the Seoul Summer Games in 1988.
Both the winter sports athletes and the Pyeongchang organizing committee came back from Sochi with some lessons learned about how to host some memorable games and make the state at home their own. 송지선, Arirang News, Incheon.
Good morning, everyone. Let's take a look at what's making headlines around the world. Ukraine's interim president, Alexander Turchinov, has raised concerns about separatism in the country's Russian-speaking regions after formation of a unity government was delayed to Thursday. In Parliament, Turchinov said he would discuss the issue with law enforcement agencies, and the president was later quoted saying that those found guilty of separatist acts would be punished. The Ukrainian parliament, meanwhile, has voted to take ousted President Viktor Yanukovych to the International Criminal Court for causing the deaths of more than 100 anti-government protesters. Yanukovych, whose arrest warrant has been issued, was last seen on the Crimean Peninsula last Sunday. Ibrahim Malab has been appointed the new Prime Minister of Egypt after the sudden resignation of the nation's interim government. Malab used to head a large construction company during the reign of ousted leader Hosni Mubarak and was a member of the ruling political party. Malab says he will form a new government within days and will focus on defeating terrorism and paving the way for a smooth presidential election that's set to take place in the next few weeks. The Eurozone's economy is gradually recovering, and the economic growth rate for 2014 is expected to reach 1.2%. The European Commission said Tuesday that 0.1 percentage point faster than a forecast made at the end of last year. Germany, the Eurozone's biggest economy, is especially expected to contribute in the growth at 1.8%. The second and third biggest economies, France and Italy, will lag behind at 1% and 0.6% respectively. The United States has warned that it will pull all U.S. troops out of Afghanistan by the end of this year, as the Afghan president is dragging his feet on signing a security agreement with Washington, which was agreed upon last year. Officials say U.S. President Barack Obama conveyed Washington's plans to his Afghan counterpart Hamid Karzai on Tuesday. The U.S. says the agreement, which includes legal protection for U.S. forces, has to be in place before it commits to leaving some troops behind for counterinsurgent operations and training. U.S. troops have been in Afghanistan since 2001, when it toppled the Taliban after the 9/11 attacks.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the return of the South Korean Olympians after 17 days of competition at the Sochi Winter Games. And despite not making the top 10 in the medal count, they still received a hero's welcome. Now at the Incheon International Airport, the fans, media, and the families welcomed the Olympians as each and every athlete received a handmade chocolate, which was in the shape of an Olympic medal. And while most of the spotlight was on figure skater Kim Yeon-ah, fans can now look forward to 4 years later at the Pyeongchang Winter Games. And in a few months, we'll have another major sporting event to look forward to as the 2014 Brazil World Cup is set to take place in the summer. But while football fans are getting excited, the Brazilians, well, not so much. Just months before the World Cup kicks off, the latest poll by Datafolha shows that Brazilians who favor hosting the World Cup is at an all-time low at just 52%, down from 79% in November of 2008. Brazilians believe that the billions of dollars being spent on the World Cup can be used to improve the nation's healthcare and the transportation system, sparking a demonstration last year. And moving over to boxing, where Floyd Money Mayweather Jr. celebrated his 37th birthday by announcing his latest fight via Twitter. After much anticipation, the undefeated Mayweather announced that he'll be fighting Marcos Maidana, who's 35-3 with 31 KOs. Mayweather stated that Maidana's last performance really brought his attention and that it should be a great fight. The 45-0 Mayweather did not announce whether he'll be fighting in Las Vegas or in Brooklyn's Barclays Center. And moving over to the AFC Champions League, where the group stages kicked off for a couple of K-League Classic teams, and with Diego Forlan coming in late for Sarazo Osaka against the Pohang Steelers. Both sides drew 1-1, with FC Seoul dominating the Central Coast Mariners 2-0 thanks to goals from Osmar and Yunil-Lok. And with that, shifting gears to some Tuesday night's KBL action, we had the Seoul Samsung Thunders take on Anyang KGC, so let's take a look at the highlights. And of course, jumping into the game here, Samsung Thunders off to a great start as they take a 24-11 lead before KGC rallies back in the second quarter, take a 38-36 lead going into halftime. KGC continues to dominate the paint in the third quarter of the game, outscoring the Thunders 25-19, with Sean Evans leading the way with 19 points and 9 rebounds. As Anyang KGC takes this game 86-78, your final score. And now finishing things off with some V-League action from last night, the IBK Altos continue to dominate as they beat Hyundai Hillstate 3-1 over on the women's side. Meanwhile, with the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers taking on KEPCO Vicstorm, let's take a look at the highlights. Of course, in the first set, KEPCO going for the upset win here as they take the first set in a close one, 25-23. But the Skywalkers improved their blocking game throughout the rest of the way as they sweep the next 3 sets, 25-22, 25-20, and 25-21, with Liberman Algamez putting up 27 attack points on the night as the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers take this game 3-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, we are starting a day with a stretch of mild morning lows, and daily highs will stay on the mild side throughout the day. But toxic fine dust that comes from China will continue to blanket the Korean peninsula. And as we can see, the most parts of the country have been and will suffer from high level of fine and ultra fine dust particles. So if we can, let's try to stay indoors and take a dust mask before heading out. Now, we have a band of showers in store on this afternoon in regions down south of 5 to 20 millimeters of precipitation, and thankfully that will remove some of the dust in the air for down south, but not here in the central region. So please keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. The morning low in Seoul is at 2 and will get up to 14, and daily high in Daegu and Gwangju and Busan will all top out at 11 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will climb up to 12 and Daejeon will rise to 14, while the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will be slightly cooler than yesterday at -1. Now that's all for me at this hour, and hope you have a wonderful day.
And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Thank you for watching.